feels really critical to start our summit grounding us in the complex realities of the environment in which we're all operating. It's really helpful for us to keep this in mind as we move throughout the rest of the summit. I want to make a note that Walter will be signing books at the evening reception, and that books can be purchased at the Craig Claiborne bookstore throughout the conference, and that's in Roth Hall. If you have questions about where to find that, you can ask our hospitality desk. Okay, I am going to introduce briefly our next session and invite our moderator up. So in the next session, we're going to be exploring the rapidly changing landscape influencing our dietary trends of consumers today. So we're going to have the help of leading experts in the fields of nutrition, sustainability, and business. And we'll hear more ways about the ways in which the food service industry can respond in an informed way. So to set the stage for the session, I'm going to invite Joanna Fantozzi, Senior Editor of the Nation's Restaurant News, to the stage as our moderator. Joanna has spent more than a decade reporting on and writing about the restaurant and hospitality industry, and we're grateful to have her with us today. Join me in welcoming Joanna.
Great, thank you so much. Good afternoon, I'm Joanna Fantozzi, Senior Editor with Nation's Restaurant News. Welcome to the 12th Annual Menus of Change Leadership Summit at the Culinary Institute of America. For this second session, we will be watching a presentation, and then I will be moderating a follow-up panel discussion with some esteemed industry experts on navigating dietary macro trends from food as medicine to GLP-1 drug advances. We'll explore how hot topics such as the growing concerns over climate change and ultra-processed foods, alongside dietary trends like drug therapies for weight loss, are affecting the food and nutrition industries. First, we'll hear from Monica Ambern, MSRDN, and Vice President of Eat Well Global, Inc., who will share a presentation on GLP-1 weight loss drug therapies and their impact on food service and nutrition worlds. Monica, welcome. Thank you so much for being here, and please take it away.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I have 25 slides and 15 minutes, so I am going to rock and roll and tell you all that we have learned about GLP-1 in the most recent past. But as I go into this, I want to preface everything with this is a very fastly evolving space. Statistics are changing literally month to month on this. So, but what we're going to share with you today is really what we know to date, and I hope that you have a lot of learnings that you can take back to your individual positions. But first, just a level set, what is a GLP-1 receptor agonist? And I think we've all heard of Ozempic at this point, but this is really what we're talking about. It is a medication that was really developed for glucose management, but we have learned that this medication has a great impact on the ability to help people lose weight as well. So in case you've been under a rock, this is all the rage from celebrities to everyday people that live down the street from you. You likely know somebody who has taken this by this point in time. But as I mentioned, for folks that take this, they can experience up to a 20% weight reduction within a year, and that is incredible. As a registered dietitian myself, in my past life, I've worked with folks in a weight management counseling capacity, and it is very difficult for people to lose 5% of their body weight. So to lose 20% within 6 to 12 months is just life-changing. But we're also seeing that the impact on other chronic diseases such as heart disease and reducing the risk of heart attack is also incredible. So the implications for this medication from a public health perspective are very, very incredible, and we haven't even began to see the full effects of it yet. So as I mentioned, we're seeing this all over the media. We see celebrities that have shrunk what seems like overnight. And as you can imagine, more and more people are starting to ask about this. And that's because 42% of Americans over the age of 20 live with obesity. And most of those folks want to change that. They want to lose weight. And there's some generational considerations there as well. But at the end of the day, the GLP prescription claims are on the rise. They've grown over 500% since 2019. And it's expected that by 2030, 9% of the population will be taking some sort of GLP-1 medication. So this has massive, massive implications for every aspect of food and nutrition, as well as food service. But as we zoom out, we want to, most of the emphasis on this has really been in the United States, but this is also of interest globally. So we're seeing some approvals happening in other countries, but there is a lack of availability, mostly because I think, the countries that have access are using all of it. So supply and demand is certainly an issue at the moment, but we do expect to see more green fill up this map over the near future. So at Eat Well Global, just to level set on who we are a communication and strategy agency for all companies that really touch food, nutrition, healthcare, agriculture. So we work with a variety of clients, but we wanted to really zoom out and say, okay, what's happening in this space? What are consumers doing differently when they take GLP-1 medications? And so this was some preliminary data from Morgan Stanley showing that for folks that are taking this, they're actually eating more fruits and vegetables, and they're turning to more of those weight loss management foods. And so I'm going to refer to meal replacement shakes and bars, protein shakes, et cetera. That really falls under that category. And really looking at lean meats and lower fat dairy products. But as you see, they begin to start consuming less of refined grains, frozen meals, instant canned goods and soups, salty snacks, confections, alcohol, as well as carbonated drinks, specifically sugary drinks. So this is what we were hearing, but we also wanted to take a deeper dive into that ourselves, and we'll get to that in just a minute. But what has been happening in terms of any direct impact on food and beverage sales? And obviously, with inflation, prices have affected folks, so we do see kind of an outlier bar here in terms of the overall beverage spend. But as a whole, folks that are using GLP-1s are purchasing fewer units and spending less on food and beverage compared to those who are not. And so this is a massive shift, and it's expected by 2030 that the average American caloric intake will decrease by about 2.5%. And so again, from a public health perspective, that's great. We think about, as a dietitian, we've been trying to get people to eat smaller portions for many years. But we also realize that there are significant economic impacts to this as well. And so, as we're, talking to our food companies and our food service suppliers, that we want to make sure that we put this in context and help you determine ways to really cater to this audience and be a resource to them as this trend continues to grow. So with that, we know that healthcare professionals provide a really unique perspective on this, and to date, we really haven't seen any research with healthcare professionals that really asks them, okay, what are your patients eating when they're taking these drugs? So for us, we took it upon ourselves to say, okay, we want to talk to registered dietitians. At Eat Well Global, 90% of us that work at the company, and there's only 20 of us, but 90% of us are RDs or have a degree in public health. And so we thought, we need to go to the source. We need to talk to the folks who actually see the changes in how people are eating. And so that's why this audience was chosen. Again, like I said, I only have 15 minutes, but we asked them 30 questions, and our full report is over 60 pages long. Happy to connect with you to, if you ever want a deep dive on that, but I'm going to hit the highlights today of our findings. But these are just some examples of the types of questions that we covered with this audience. And to be specific, these dietitians, this was not just like a random dietitian. We're looking at dietitians that work in weight management. So this is what they do. do. They work with people on losing weight. And so what we think is really valuable as we talk to this audience and hear from them is some insights into how product and menu offerings could be potentially changed, or any innovations that might be considered, overall portfolio transformation, and then opportunity to engage with healthcare professionals as you go through that journey, but also once you have, a new menu offering or product that you want to educate this audience on them, because they are the front lines. So the overall results of our survey found that, yes, folks that are taking GLP-1s are actually eating healthier. And this makes the dietitian community feel a lot of different ways, as you can imagine, because it's like we want to jump up and down and say yes, but it's also like, but this is exactly what we've been trying to get folks to do. And why did it take a pill to help these individuals get there? But regardless, it's happening. So from a high level, we're seeing an 86% improvement in portion sizes. That's so significant and really powerful. 78% improved tendencies towards excessive snacking. So they're cutting back on those in-between meal snacks. Also a reduction in emotional and stress eating. So as we all know, when it comes to nutrition, it's one thing to understand nutrition science and know what you're supposed to do. It's another thing when you're a living, breathing human, you're going about your day, you feel a certain way, certain things happen. Maybe you were running late and you left your lunchbox on the counter, or whatever, you were carrying your extra healthy snacks with you, you left it on the counter. Life happens, right? So we understand that there's a very human component to how people eat, but it is very interesting to see that something is happening in our brain chemistry on GLP-1 medications that is helping people kind of streamline and focus and really change how they're eating. So as we look into some of the specifics on what people are choosing to eat, we're first going to talk about protein. So the great news here is that folks are cutting out the fatty animal meats. And we didn't break into species on this question here, but they're choosing lean proteins, lean animal proteins instead. So again, cardiovascular wise, and also from a weight management perspective, this is a good shift. But what we did not see was a shift towards plant-based vegan meats or tofu based proteins or those legumes and pulses. So this really indicates that folks are sticking to what is familiar and trading up to that leaner version of that product within, again, the scope of what is familiar to them. Also very interesting is that, while we say, yes, the overall diet has improved from a health perspective, it's not perfect, and convenience foods still remain super relevant and prevalent with this group. Again, as I, kind of anecdotally mentioned, people are busy, they're running out the door. That hasn't changed, so whether they're taking the drug or not. So the need for protein shakes and those meal replacement type shakes has increased with this group. They are trying to make better decisions, again, lowering the fat, increasing the protein, but also looking to increase fiber in the foods that they eat, but they don't necessarily cook from scratch more often than those who are not taking GLP-1s. And then taking a step back and looking at their overall health habits, we are seeing an increase in their overall health monitoring. They are starting to read food labels more, and they are picking up their physical activity. And I think that's one of the big fears of people taking GLP-1s is, okay, this is a magic pill. Everybody wants a magic pill. They're just going to do this and they're not going to do anything differently. But our data is suggesting, especially for those who are seeing registered dietitians, they're putting in the work. So, and it may be that this is the first time in their life where they've felt like their work is paying off because they have a little bit of help from this drug. So there's a lot of psychology and there's a lot of brain chemistry implications to unpack with this over the future, but people are changing how they behave outside of just how they eat as well. So we do want to hit on some of the concerns and barriers for recommendations. And again, not a physician, not a pharmacist here, but I do want to come at this from the perspective of dietitians. And we're on the fence. Only 26% of registered dietitians are saying, yeah, I think this is, great. You should talk to your doctor about this. We believe in food first, and I don't think that's ever going to change. But as we'll see in just a minute, for those who are in favor of it, there are some considerations there as well. But for overall, we're really concerned about the long-term efficacy and safety. There's a lot of discussion about, do you stay on these medications for life? I don't think anybody wants to stay on a medication for life. So that is a big hurdle for individuals to get over. But there's also the unknown side effects. It's only been in market for a few years, and as wonderful research has already taken place to help provide us a heads up on some of those side effects, like gastroparesis. That's a very serious side effect. We still don't know if there are any additional long-term side effects that we're unaware of. And so on and so forth, the affordability of it, and really kind of the ethics of it as well. By taking it, am I making it unavailable for someone else? Or by recommending it as a dietitian, are we making sure that we're prioritizing really need it the most? So it's very loaded for us as well as it is for the general public. Some additional concerns that have come up, is this going to be triggering from an eating disorder perspective for folks who may have had those tendencies in their past? Does this trigger or induce some of those behaviors that have been solved for? So that's kind of a more niche concern, but it exists. And, none of us want to promote fads. We want there to be a long-term solution here. Some folks are afraid that this is just going to be a quick fix. But when it comes down to it, for the dietitians who have worked with people on these drugs, they cannot deny the fact that they have worked and they have helped. So, happy to go through, these individual statistics in more detail. But while they feel very conflicted on it, they would recommend it if somebody had really just hit the end of their road in terms of making progress on their weight loss efforts. So with that being said, where do we go from here? So again, talking to dietitians has really helped us determine some specific needs for product innovation, the transformation in your offerings, as well as how to work with dietitians on a really a partnership basis. And really, from a food service perspective, we see a few opportunities. As I mentioned, nutrients are really important to this audience. It kind of harkens back to 20 years ago when bariatric surgery was all of a sudden on the rise. We saw back then a lot of micronutrient deficiencies. People started losing their hair, and they started having, significant GI discomfort. And so the need for supplemental vitamins and minerals was incredibly important because there was such a, most often, smaller capacity for meals. And so portion sizes had to be drastically reduced. So that's kind of happening again, except it's not a physical reduction. It's a more intrinsic inability to eat more than what they can at that moment in time. So small, frequent meals are really important to this audience in ensuring that they're getting the protein that they need as well as the vitamins and minerals. So micronutrients are very important. And again, since we can only eat a little bit at a time, it's all about making it as lean as possible and really focusing on that protein. But again, the medication slows the mobility, the motility of the gastrointestinal tract. So the risk of constipation and gastroparesis is very high. So increased fluids is really, really important with this group, as well as making sure that they're getting enough fiber. So it comes down to thinking about that and saying, okay, but we know these folks are busy like anyone else. How do we make convenience foods that fit that need? And, I'll give a prime example. If you want to know what people are thinking, go and join one of these Ozempic support groups on Facebook or on social media. The crowdsourcing of hacks is incredible. And I'll give you one example really quick. So someone started a thread saying, hey, I am struggling on getting protein. How can I boost it? And this lady said, here's what I do when I'm going through the drive-thru at Starbucks. She's like, I always keep Premier Protein shakes with me, like the ones you get at like Costco or Sam's Club. I always keep those shakes in my car, and that's my snack if I need something. But when I want a caffeine hit, I get 2 shots of espresso in a venti cup from Starbucks, and then I pour my chocolate Premier Protein on top of it, and I shake it up. I've got 30 grams of protein, 160 calories. I've got the vitamins and minerals that were in that meal replacement, and boom, I'm done. That's it. And there was like 500 comments and likes on that single post on Facebook. So the ideas are there. There's just a lot of opportunity for operators to take those ideas and solution for it. So again, when it comes back to dietitians, use us, tap into us, and educate us on what it is that you're trying to do, because we are the front lines. We recommend restaurants. We tell people where they should be going. So people come to us for that help, and so there's a lot that we can do to help inform the general public on your efforts and specifics. And so with that, I think I've given us enough time to continue on with our panel here, so thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Monica. That was fascinating. Now I want to welcome the stage our other 2 panelists for this afternoon, Sarah Burnett, Principal, Burnett Strategy and Communications, and Michael Kaufman, Senior Lecturer at Harvard Business School. Thank you both for being here. All right, great. Looking forward to this discussion. Before we get started, I just want to remind the audience that you should, if you have any questions, please do submit them to the Slido app. We're going to be reading some at the end if we have time. Now, as we just saw, thanks to Monica's thorough presentation, dietary and other types of macro health trends are impacting the way we experience, purchase, and consume food. In addition to the rise of GLP-1 drugs like Ozempic, what are other relevant macro trends right now that operators and food service operators and other folks in the food world should be taking note of and adapting to? So I'm going to go around and talk about this. Why don't we start with you, Michael? If you could tell me a bit about what is a macro trend that you're seeing that is impacting us?
A macro trend for the restaurant world, food service, or how macro shall we get?
Let's say the food service world.
Sure, okay. So I think macro trends certainly are, we've seen huge increases and some now decreases in cost of goods. So that's a macro trend in terms of food purchasing and beverage purchasing. We've seen certainly labor as a macro trend that has hit, I think, all elements of the U.S. Business world, but certainly restaurants and food service generally. In terms of food itself, I think we have seen a growth in flexitarian perspectives of consumers, and that they are seeking different sorts of foods. Has that been fundamentally changing what's been happening in the menus? Probably more of smaller restaurant groups, and certainly, and I applaud and welcome in the audience those who are in university, K through 12, or in non-commercial food service, because they have the opportunity, I think, to really influence what young and in a sense, captive consumers can enjoy, that as you look at scaled enterprises, which is something that I'm particularly interested in, fewer degrees of freedom perhaps there. So those are a few of the macro trends that we're seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like that flexitarian trend is a buzzword we've been hearing about for quite some time. Sarah, what about you? What are some macro trends that you're seeing in the larger food service industry?
Yeah, thank you. I think that there's 3 key trends that I really think are influencing us beyond some other trends like GLP-1 drugs and shifts in diet overall. First is, I think, this interest in and this growing kind of expanding of this evolution of the definition of wellness that gets into functional benefits of foods. And we're seeing a lot of consumers looking to food to do beyond what it typically does. If it's not just about fuel or energy, it's mood boosting, it's brain boosting, it's helping with sleep. And I think that changes the consumer's relationship with food and how they're making diet choices. I think that's emerging. I mean, it's very new, but I do think that that's continuing to expand. I think the second is, and good for all of us, especially those in this room who are interested, the planet-conscious consumer is a trend that I don't think is going away. And what's really exciting, I think the first time I was at Menus of Change it was at least 10 years ago. Very different. It was still a conversation about that niche green consumer, and now it's not. It is boomers, it's Gen Z, it's everyone who's more conscious and aware and informed about how diet connects to planetary health. And there's still a say-do gap, so I know that we all have that. We know, but we don't always act on that. Hopefully that continues to evolve in the right direction. And then I think the last piece is kind of building on a slightly different shift on flexitarian is I see less people and a trend overall of less defining as I am X. I am a vegetarian, I am a vegan, whatever that might be. And I'm seeing just a general shift in I like to make better choices. And I think the prime example of this is the Olipop and the Poppies of the world. Folks don't want to necessarily make the trade completely away from, a sugary beverage or something that has a flavor profile they're excited by, but they're wanting to say, I want to make a better choice. What's that little shift that I can make and still satisfy on taste? But then I also do something that maybe is a little bit better for me when there is a trade-off and there's not an option of trading maybe to the best solution of just drinking a glass of water.
Yeah, it's so interesting that so many of these trends and really shifts that we're seeing are still pretty new and still have probably room to grow. Monica, I would love to, since you already spoke about the GLP-1 weight loss drug trend, I would love to dive a little bit deeper. Can you give us a little bit more detail on how food service operators should be adapting to this trend and how much it stands to affect their restaurants?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's the billion-dollar question, right? Just for perspective, in 2023, 1 in 60 individuals took a GLP-1 medication. So I think it's safe to assume that we're looking at about 2% of the population in 2024. And it's projected, again, as I mentioned in the slides, that by 2030, we're looking at 9, maybe 10% of the US population taking this drug. So what does that mean in dollars? We're not really quite sure, from the impact to, supermarkets to food service, what have you. But again, I think there's massive opportunity to really provide solutions to this group that are approachable and that are kind of dignified. I think there's been a lot of talk about how do we make products for this group. And it's pretty simple. If we think about where these folks are coming from, they're regular people. They don't necessarily want to be called out. They don't want a stigma when they go to make a food choice. Like, this isn't gluten-free. This is not an allergen or an intolerance. This is a very personal journey for people when they're trying to lose weight. And again, as we think about what the drug was intended for, from the diabetes management side of things, that's a little bit different. But when it comes to weight, people want to be dignified and treated with dignity. So I don't think that there need to be labeled products, on menus that saying this is GLP-1 friendly. I don't think that's ever going to be an attribute that needs to be called out. But I think just giving people information such as grams of protein per serving size and offering those smaller plates and smaller portions, that's going to go a long way, because people can then go about their normal daily lives and go out to eat with their loved ones or their friends and not necessarily give it away that they are making this choice for themselves. It's very personal, and it's something that I think needs to be considered.
Yeah, for sure. I'm actually going to switch to an audience question to piggyback off of that. Regarding GLP-1s, is there concern or research showing that users aren't eating enough calories or nutrient-rich foods?
Yes. Definitely. So micronutrients are incredibly important, and kind of to the point that I made about, 20 years ago, we saw some of this with bariatric surgery. There have been some folks that have had some dermatological issues, that because of the micronutrient deficiencies. It's not as profound as we've seen with the bariatric surgery population, but preserving that lean body mass is so important. So the vitamins and minerals to support that lean body mass growth, because ideally people are taking these medications and then engaging in some strength and resistance training to also maintain and build their lean body mass at the same time.
Yeah, for sure. And I'd like to ask Michael, it can sometimes be challenging as a business owner to translate these large-scale trends that we've been talking about into business operations, to kind of go from the macro to the micro. Could you talk a little bit about how food service operators can make responsive progress on some of these issues in their own businesses?
Sure. I think it's a great question. First, as Monica pointed out, we're looking at a very small percentage of the population at this point, but having the benefit of research that Monica and her firm have done to understand implications for consumers, then it translates to who are your consumers, who's coming to your food service operation, what might they need, and how might it be served. I have close friends and family who are on these drugs, and there's never been a conversation about am I taking the drug, but they are looking to see what choices are on menus that are I think looking as well. I saw recently an interview with the CEO of Nestle, and they're looking very actively at the question of, what nutritional needs now need to be met, and that will be, I think, things that will be supplied to food service in addition to directly to consumers.
Mm-hmm. And so I guess when we're thinking of taking these actions within our own businesses, the conversation has to start somewhere. So Sarah, would you mind sharing some insights on where and how operators, business owners can start these conversations within their own organization, and how to communicate with both your employees and your customers?
Yeah, so I would say there's, I always think short-term and long-term. How do we live into this trend? And to your point, only 2% of the population now. Let's think about it as a bigger opportunity of the rise in snacking. People snack, 3.6 times per day or something like that, a traditional American. So you can do the jobs for both. It's an and opportunity. Short term, it's about analyzing your menu, talking to a dietitian, and seeing kind of what's already out there. You probably already are using ingredients that have functional benefits. Do you already have half portions, or is there a way for you to make an easy half portion of that grain bowl that's already beloved? So I think that's the short-term opportunity. And then long-term, it's getting into your strategic mapping, because 9% by 2030, that's astronomical when you think about the business opportunity, and 2030 gets here really quick. So depending on the size of your operation, you're looking at an innovation pipeline of 18 months. So it's about engaging your menu strategy team now and thinking about your overall menu architecture as well as the product offerings you're going to have. I think that's the opportunity, and I would be having that conversation now. I wouldn't be waiting 2 years from now, because you really want to get and hold on to that, attract and get out that customer well before 2030.
Mm-hmm. We're kind of getting out of time, but I'm going to sneak in one more question. There's actually been a couple of questions on Slido specifically asking about food as medicine. And this is for anybody. I guess, what are your thoughts on the buzz phrase, food as medicine, and what implications it could have on the food service industry? Anyone?
I feel like you're the best to answer this.
Food as medicine is certainly a very diverse and loaded topic. It really varies by region and state, in terms of the products and services that are available. And what I would say, if we think about, food programs in a pyramid, I had a great graphic that I shared yesterday, but with dietary guidelines on the bottom of the pyramid, and we have like medically tailored meals. That goes to a very small percentage of the population that's even eligible for those products and services right now. But the reality is reimbursement is picking up for folks with disease states, renal disease, diabetes, and heart disease, specifically on the medically tailored meals front, but they're all frozen. Like all of these meals are frozen and being delivered to their homes. So I think when it comes to food service, there is still that away from home eating solution that is not being solved yet with the current programs. And so I think that needs to be taken into consideration from a policy perspective as those programs are being built, because we can't expect people to only eat a frozen meal at home for 3-4 meals a day. That's just not realistic.
I think that's a great note to end on. Thank you all so very much. Give them a round of applause, please.